Hi, this is World Cultures, Unit 6, and today we're going to be talking about Mexico, its history. Now, Mexico being such a large and important country, we're going to delve into its history a little bit more than some of the others. First, we need to take a look at the Olmec civilizations. Now, this was the first large Mesoamerican civilization, and all Meso means is middle, so those civilizations that are in the middle of the Americas. The culture and technology they invented and created would be the foundation for the other civilizations of Mesoamerica that we'll be looking at later. This included the growing of corn and obsidian tools. And obsidian is a type of rock that looks like black glass, and it comes from all the volcanic activity that is in Mexico. Now, they use this obsidian to carve out these huge stones that you can see down there in the bottom right. And they also carve jewelry and masks that you can see in the top right out of the jade. Then eventually came the Mayans. And the Mayans lived in the Yucatan Peninsula, and they developed math, astronomy, and the calendar. And the Mayans really took the Olmec civilization to the next level. They built huge pyramids that you can see there in the top right, and they invented a system of writing of hieroglyphics very similar to the Egyptians that uses pictures. And you can see to the top left some of a mural, a painting of one of their ceremonies and the gods that they had there. The Mayans disappeared suddenly, and the reason for the sudden collapse of their civilization has been the debate among historians for a long time. But it's mostly believed because they had been cutting down rainforest to farm, and eventually they had too many people and not enough rainforest to be able to develop the food that they needed to support so many people, and they collapsed. Next and lastly of these ancient civilizations, we have the Aztecs. Now, the Aztecs actually called themselves the Mexia, but so many people have been calling them Aztecs and throughout history books for so long, we just continued on with that name. They weren't a single people. We do know that it was actually three different groups that came together in a alliance that ruled over and conquered those other people around them. They farmed crops on floating gardens in the very large lake where their capital, Tenochtitlan, was. And it was a very large urban city that held many hundreds of thousands of people. And they were a very violent and warlike culture. They enslaved their neighbors, sacrificed people to the gods on a regular basis, about one a day for some cities. So they were very hated by all of the people around them. And despite all of this, they did have a lot of the same art, culture, math, and science that comes along from the Mayans. But it is different. It should not be, the Aztecs should not be seen as simply later Mayans. They are in a different part of Mexico, and they are slightly different. They definitely have different languages. In 1519, Hernan Cortez from Spain came to the Americas with an army of 600 soldiers, and he had a single purpose of showing up, colonizing, and conquering the people he found there. And the people he found were the Aztec empires. And he defeated, with 600 soldiers, of millions of Aztec warriors, and he did this in part by getting all of the groups and people around the Aztecs that hated the Aztecs because the Aztecs had been so mean to them to side with him and help him defeat them. Their leader, the emperor of the Aztecs, Montezuma, very famously spoke to Cortez and then was murdered by Cortez, which partly put the Aztecs at a disadvantage from then on. The settlers in Spain, they came to live in the new colony, which they called Mexico. They raised cattle, they grew corn, they mined silver and gold, and they brought with them Christianity. And you can see a mission there in the top right, the mission of San Jose. So they took gold, they took food, and they brought Western civilization from Europe, and they brought Christianity with them and forced a lot of Native Americans to convert. They also enslaved a lot of the Native Americans. It isn't talked about much, but they did use a lot of the Native Americans as slaves in the mines. But eventually, Mexico gains its independence in 1821, and they set up a republic form of government. But that republic quickly turns into a dictatorship because of a man named Santa Anna, who takes over. As dictator, he loses a lot of valuable territory. As Texas revolts in the Texas Revolution, he loses some land to the Comanche Indians, and then eventually the United States goes to war with Mexico over Texas, over New Mexico, Arizona, and California, in what's known as the Mexican War. Um, Mexico obviously loses that war. Later, people like Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata tried to help the poor that had been growing in Mexico, and they ended up creating command economies and bringing a lot of the socialism that only recently has been brought away. And the picture to the top right is of Pancho Villa and Zapata.